I started my real estate photography business 10 years ago, and in the time since then, my business has consistently grown through many challenges. Obviously, we had COVID, but then more recently, about 3 years ago, I completely stepped out of daily operations at my business, and it has continued to grow. And so on this video, I'm gonna give you a masterclass on how to grow your real estate photography business more quickly, and in fact, how to build a real estate photography business that will grow no matter what you do or don't do in that business, how to build a good business. And I'm not saying that as someone who thinks they have it all figured out because they're so smart. I'm saying that as someone who made every mistake in the book, sometimes multiple times in a row, and over the last 10 years has distilled my understanding and teaching into something that I think you can replicate without having to go through that same 10 years of trial and error. So if you already have a business or you're thinking about starting a real estate photography business, this is an important video and something worth watching at least once and taking notes on, so that way when you build your business or work to take your business to the next level, you're doing it based upon the most up-to-date, tried and true methods and not having to go through any trial and error. I wish that I would have been smart enough to look up to people who built businesses similar to the one I wanted to build at the start, but I wasn't. I just put my head down and I ground it out, and that is a way to do things, but there are better ways to do things, and it's always smarter to learn from others' mistakes. So I want to start with a story about a client that we worked with for a long time, and she was a great client. So we had done a shoot. It was actually me who did the shoot. This was years ago at this point. And I did the shoot, got the pictures back, edited them, they were good, sent them to the client, and she wrote back, and I'm paraphrasing here, it was a much longer paragraph than this, that she was disappointed in the photos and she didn't like them at all. And that was unusual because we didn't change anything about the way we shot the photos, and we'd worked with this client for a while, like over 15 shoots at that point. So enough to know whether they like our photos or not, and she actually never had another retouch at all. She never requested anything differently on the photos. And so before I called the client, because I think communication is really important, we'll talk about that in a second, I went through the photos and I made notes about what I thought was wrong with them. So I noticed the verticals were off in some of them, they could have been a little better. I noticed the white balance maybe wasn't perfect. Some of the photos were like a little yellower than I would want, just slightly, nothing big. And I made this huge list of stuff that I thought was wrong with the photos because I wanted to be prepared. And so I called the client, she answered, and I was about to go into all of the things that I thought were wrong with the photos, and before I did that, a stroke of wisdom came out of somewhere and told me, why don't you ask her what you think is wrong with them first? And so I said, yeah, why don't you run me through these photos? I've taken a look, I have some ideas about what I think could be improved, but run me through the list. And so she went through the list, and the list, I kid you not, was there's a lot of dog poop in the yard. It showed up in the photos. There's a hole in the wall in the master bedroom. The laundry room and a couple of the other rooms were a mess. I had done a lot of cleaning on site, but there was just only so much you could do in a limited period of time, And so she went through this entire list of things. None of it was about the photos themselves. It was solely about what was in the photos. And so everything I had about white balance, about verticals, none of that she cared about. And I think this is a really important story and point to start off this video with, which is you build a good business if when a client has an issue, you get to the core thing they care about and not what you think they care about. And there's more that I want to unpack on that in a little bit, but I just thought it was so interesting that I had this idea of what was wrong with the photos and she had a completely different idea. And so if I would have done what I used to do in the past and what I see a lot of photographers doing and tried to fix the photos, done it via email because you're too scared to call them or you didn't want to talk to them, you don't like confrontation, none of us do, and I would have edited those photos and sent them back, she still would have thought they were awful, and I would have been so confused. And I see this happening a lot to where the client gets really fed up, the photographer gets fed up, and then they fire their client or do something stupid that risks that relationship or ends that relationship for the future. And just a side note here, you don't build a business ending relationships. There are occasionally times where a client is too picky and you need to refer them to a different photographer, but I see a lot of photographers doing it way too soon because they didn't come to the correct understanding with their client, and so they couldn't serve the client properly, meaning there wasn't proper communication in place. And so the biggest lesson I can give you, and I'm gonna dive into this further, is you'll build a good business if when there's issues, you figure out proper communication to actually get to the core of those issues, right? A lot of people think they know what the issue is. Very few people actually do the work to figure out what the actual issue is. And these people over here that get to the core of it, they're the ones that build awesome businesses, because you don't build a business by what you think is right. You build a business by what the client wants from you and what they think is right ultimately. And one of the biggest things that my team and I see holding businesses back is they don't get to that core issue. And they don't get to that core issue because they don't like when they make a mistake, right? Nobody likes to make a mistake, and so they just want to fix the mistake. They want to keep it quiet. They don't want to talk to the client. They want to just fix it and move on and put it past them, right? And that's good. You want to get things past you, but you want to do that by actually resolving the issue, not by putting it past you. And to the extent in which you do that is the extent in which you actually have good communication, your business grows, right? Because you're actually fixing issues. But a lot of business owners just don't want to know about the issues. They want them to not hear about them or not work. You need to confront the issues head on and fix them. And because a lot of business owners are scared of issues, they don't want to deal with issues, they try to build a perfect business. They try to prevent any issue from happening in the first place, which is partly on the right track, right? You want to use issues in the past to build systems and processes to never happen again. But what happens to a lot of photographers and why they hit a cap in their business is they think that the only way to build a business is to prevent every issue. And then they say, well, the only way I can prevent every issue is if I do it all myself, because if I want it done right, I have to do it. Right? And that's something you hear a lot. That is completely untrue. That is very small-minded thinking, to think that you are the only one that can do it, right? And it's really interesting because I think it's actually really prideful a way of thinking. I don't think I'm the only one who can do it right. I think there's a lot of people out there that can do it better than me, but a lot of people say if it needs to be perfect, it needs to be me. If it needs to be done right, it needs to be me. And so they never hire and they never scale their business because they're so worried about being perfect and fixing issues. But what you really have to do here, and this is a hard switch for most people, is you have to go from being perfect and not having any issues to being the best at solving the issues when they come up. If you put a lot of time into how you solve issues, you'll build a much bigger business. And so I showed that in the story at the start, meaning if I correctly solve that issue, as I got lucky and did in that case, that client is going to be a good client going forward. And so what you actually need to do is not prevent issues, but you need to get really skilled at fixing an issue. And so in the story I just told you, if I would have gone in there and I would have tried to fix the photos and sent them off and tried to brush this past, that would be a very poor issue solved. That would be a very poor way to solve that issue, right? I would have felt like I solved it in my head, but it wouldn't have actually solved it for the client, which is what matters. But I stumbled into it and got lucky, and I fixed the actual issue by communication, going, what does this client care about? Why did she not like this? How can we fix that? And so what we ended up doing is we ended up doing a free reshoot for her. Had her clean that stuff, move the stuff, and did that shoot. And an interesting side note here is I came to find out later, I didn't know this when I shot the house, and I didn't know this when the issues happened, that it was that agent's personal house. And so they were just over scrutinizing it. And so you wouldn't want to let that prevent the relationship in the future by going, this person's crazy. You hear that a lot. This agent's insane. That's not the case, right? They're just all of us have our days, good days and bad days. All of us have things we prioritize and don't prioritize. And your ability to figure out what that is, why the issue is there, and fix it for the agent is directly proportional to how much money you're going to make in this business. So if you want to make the most money, which is selfish, right? You do that by being the least selfish, by actually solving the client's issue. And it's amazing how that actually works. How a lot of people, I think, believe that in principle, but they don't put it into practice in their business. So to wrap up this section, you build a good business by solving issues well, not by preventing issues, right? And you solve issues well by communicating clearly and getting to a true understanding about what the issue is so you can actually fix it. That's how you solve issues, and that will help you grow your business. But I want to dive into that a little bit deeper and zoom out at the same time, which is you solve an issue by getting understanding with your client. If you're on the same page, you understand what they want, you've solved the issue, you at least know how to solve the issue. And you build an awesome business by not just understanding how to solve an issue, by understanding your client, period. And so understanding your client is the most important thing that will both allow you to solve issues and build an awesome business. Because when you understand your client, you're then accurately able to build the business that they want. And a lot of people build the business for themselves, and you have to do that. You have to build a business that suits your goals, your lifestyle, and what you want. But you do that by building a business that clients like, right? If clients like you, you have a good business. If clients don't like you, you don't have a good business, period. And continuing on that trend, what a lot of people do is they build a very inefficient business that doesn't really work for their clients or themselves, not because they built the business for themselves and not because they built the business for their client, but because they built the business they thought their client wanted. And so if you just go, oh, I'm client focused, here's what I think my clients want, you already messed up, because you have to build the business your clients actually want. And that's why communication and understanding are really important. And that takes time. That's part of why it took me a long time to figure this out and why my business didn't grow as quickly as it could have. And so on the rest of this video, I want to give you just some hacks that I learned for how to get to a deeper level of understanding with your clients, and just kind of shortcutting that by telling you exactly what they actually care about. We've had 2,000 plus clients at Norman and Young, my business. I think at this point we have a pretty good understanding of that, or at least a much better understanding of when I first started or when my business was small, and that's probably where you are. And so I would encourage you to just take what I'm about to say as fact and actually what your clients care about and build the business around that. So there's really 4 core things that I think clients really, really care about. And if you build a business that solves these 4 things, you're going to build a much bigger business than if you just solve a bunch of random issues you think. Number 1 is easy scheduling and a lot of appointment availability. If you become the photographer that is booked a week plus out, it is going to be really hard to keep that growth rate growing because your old clients may stay with you because they really know you. New clients are not going to mess with someone who's booked 7 days out, and you don't grow by your existing clients, you grow by new clients. So whatever you have to do, prioritize availability. And what that means is doing something that's scary for so many people and hiring a photographer when you get booked out more than a week. And at my business, we start, when we're about 3 days out is when we start doing that. We start looking for another photographer. So I'm not saying you have to wait for a week, but if you're booked out a week, definitely now is the time to hire a photographer. It's gonna force you, and that's gonna force you to go through the process of solving a lot of other things that are probably scaring you. You have to figure out how to hire a client. You have to figure out how to hire a photographer, where to look, how to interview, how to pay them, how to get them on board. It's gonna make you solve a bunch of problems, right? And solving problems is what you get paid for, right? You solve the problem of hiring a photographer and training them. Then you're gonna have to figure out how to train that photographer, and then you're gonna have to figure out how they make the same quality of photos that you do and interact with your clients in the same way. And I'm here to tell you, I can't explain all that in this video. It is possible, and it is easier than you think. You just have to be willing to do it. So really good availability. Whenever that becomes an issue, fix it. Fix the bottleneck in your business, with which, if you're booked more than a week out, is your availability. Number 2 kind of is the same as the first one. Speed is a theme here, is fast turnaround. If you're saying 24-hour turnaround, that is the industry standard, but 24 hours should be the next morning. There's no reason that a shoot at 3 p.m. should be delivered the next day at 3 p.m. You should always try to get your photos out early in the morning. You should build your business to make that happen. They do not want to wait on photos. Usually the point when the photos have been taken is the point when they're ready to list. Everything else is done, right? The listing paperwork signed, the home is prepped because they're not going to do the photos before the home is like as ready as it's going to get. And so they're waiting on you. Don't make people wait on you. People hate waiting. It's like speed is the number 1 priority, and that's why 2 of the 4 things are speed related. So get the photos out quickly. Whatever you have to do to make that happen, make it happen. Consistency in product. And I don't mean that your product and your photos have to be perfect every time. I mean you have a good enough level and you are rock solid at that good enough level. You don't put in 40% more work to get things perfect and waste a ton of time, but you also don't deliver garbage to your clients. So you got to figure out kind of where the threshold is and what they like, and that's what you stick to. You don't go below that. You don't spend a lot of time going above that. Either way, you are messing around with something you don't want to be messing around with and wasting a lot of time, or delivering a crappy product. You don't want to do that. So make sure your photos are good enough. And when I say good enough, a lot of people interpret that as crappy. That's not what I'm saying. I'm literally saying good enough. So break down the core of those words. It means they are good enough. They're sufficient. They're not below sufficient. They're not garbage. That's not a lazy way. That's not a way of me saying that you need to deliver a crappy product. I'm actually saying good enough. So make sure you do good enough. And number 4, arguably probably the most important one, is how easy you are to work with. And there's a lot wrapped up in this one, but if you are easier to work with, you're enjoyable to work with, you will keep and get more clients, and your team also has to be this way. And so here's what I mean by that. There's tactical things like you don't charge cancellation fees or any other stuff like that. The agent didn't want to cancel the shoot. They want the shoot to be done, and penalizing for them for that is going to create this weird dynamic. It's just not worth doing. You're trying to take $75 today's money in exchange for thousands of dollars future money. You don't make that change very often if you want to grow. And the first thing I want to hit on is a more tactical one, which is cancellation fees. I know that a lot of photographers want to charge these, and I get why you want to charge them. But think about it from the agent's perspective. Understand your client, which is the topic of this whole video. They do not want to cancel a shoot, right? Because if they cancel a shoot, that is more time before they can list this house and more time before that house can sell and they can make their money. They don't want to cancel a shoot. Don't associate pain from you with that process. They already have pain for canceling the shoot. I know you're like, oh, I want to be compensated for my time, and I get it. But when you charge a $75 or $100 cancellation fee, you are potentially taking $75 in today's money in exchange for hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of dollars in future money. And the people who grow big businesses, they don't take $100 today in exchange for $1,000 2 weeks from now, or a month from now, or a year from now. They make the other trade, right? They invest in their business so they can get the results later. Cancellation fee is a big one. Be willing to prep the house. Spend a little bit of time to get the house ready. It's not going to be perfect every time. A lot of photographers, not my job. if you want to do that, fine. It doesn't have to be your job, but it's also not going to be your paycheck and your business that grows. So really focus on how you can serve the client. Be dressed professionally, right? That's another aspect of being easy to work with. You're not hard on the eyes. You don't look disgusting. You don't smell bad. Put in effort to look presentable when you come to the shoot. Put in effort to communicate clearly with their clients, with your agent's clients, because if you do that, the agent will stop having to show up at shoots, right? I want you to think of everything you do in the frame of how can I be easier and smoother to work with, and how can I make it more enjoyable? That's really number 4 of this, is just how can you be better? And when you're better as a business, easier to work with, more enjoyable, you do more for the client, like you get more from that. And a lot of people, they go selfish. How do I get the house to be completely prepped? How do I make sure that I make money even if the agent has to cancel? I understand that, but you're building a selfish business. And if you do that, you won't build a good business. And so it's this weird flip that happens. If you want to be selfish, I'm not saying making money is selfish, but in this scenario, I think you can understand what I'm saying. If you want to be selfish, get a result for yourself, which is make more money, you do that by not designing a business for you, by designing a business for your clients. And so I hope you take something away from this video. Go watch it again. Very important stuff that I wish I would have known. And if you want help implementing this, if you want me to help you, my team and I, take that 10 years of experience and cram it down to where you can start and launch your business on the back of that experience, I highly encourage you to click the link below and apply for our coaching program. It's not committing when you apply. You'll be able to talk to our team about exactly what we do and how we can help you, and make sure that what you want to achieve is what we help people with, because quick side hint, if it is, we literally guarantee pretty amazing results as a part of that program. It's literally a guarantee. And so if you're a good fit, we'll share more with you about that. Highly encourage you to apply for coaching. And if you're not quite ready for that step and you haven't watched my free workshop yet, it's an hour long and it will cover exactly how to get started as a real estate photographer. You will also find that linked below. Hope you got value out of this. I'll see you in the next one.